the citizens voted 10 years ago to have reservoirs built, and they were never constructed.
It was like billions of dollars
Mhm.
that was supposed to go to building these reservoirs. Like, where's this money going?
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken.
Tara, oh my, the California wildfires, it's all I've been seeing. It's all I can think about right now. It looks like the apocalypse there. Like,
I know.
legit looks like the apocalypse. I
Yeah.
mean, what are they saying? Like $50 billion they're estimating in
Yep.
damages right now.
Yep.
And what's crazy too is like, so it broke out Monday, right?
Yeah.
And within a half hour, they were saying it was completely engulfing homes and stuff. Like people didn't have enough time to even get home, like if they were at work at that time. And it's just like, it's all I can think about. And I know you are from California. So right away, I was like, okay, what's going on? Do you know people there? How's your mom? How's your family? How's your friends?
Yeah, so fortunately my mom doesn't live there anymore. She's in the Coachella Valley now, so she's like an hour and a half away. I
I
have
know you've
plenty.
told me that before, but I've never been to California. And so it's like, I feel like everything's LA. Like I have no idea where anything is.
Yeah, she's on the other side of Southern California, and I guess it maybe not. That was a weird way to say that, but she's about 2 hours away. So I do obviously still have a lot of friends that live there. I've talked to a lot of my prior coworkers at LAPD who are helping out with evacuations and stuff like that. I haven't spoken with anyone who has lost their home.
Well, good, good.
So that's fortunate. I know my husband's parents are somewhat near there, but he talked to them yesterday and they're doing okay. So my mom just continually gives me updates. Like I wake up in the morning and she sends me all these news clips. And last I saw, there's like 6 different fires going on. So it,
Crazy.
yeah, it started with the one in Pacific Palisades and moved into Malibu and then the Hollywood Hills and like Altadena, Pasadena area. And I think
Now,
there's
are
like
these all like rich areas where like the celebrities live, or
the
is it
Hollywood
everywhere?
Hills. Yeah. Hollywood Hills, Pacific Palisades, Malibu. Those are wealthy areas. Altadena, Pasadena, yes and no. Kind of depends where you are. Um, but primarily up in like the hills areas. Yeah. And from what I understand, like there's very minimal containment so far. Like thousands of homes have been destroyed. Last I saw, it was over 200,000 people that had to evacuate. As of this morning, yesterday, I saw it was 5 confirmed deaths. And as of this morning, I saw it's up to 10. And they just expect there's going to be more. And like, oh my God, I feel like I have so much to say about this because it's so fucking tragic. And yes, it's a natural disaster, but a lot of what is happening with these fires is completely due to like negligence and utter mismanagement that could have been prevented by the state and by the city if they had their fucking priorities straight and if they had been focusing on these glaring issues that have been going on for years and years and years. And what have we seen, especially in the last 4 years? This focus on DEI and wasting money on projects that have never like even been started, much less completed.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Um, I feel like that's the overall sense that I'm getting from everyone. I mean, everyone from normal people to like the celebrities that live out there. And that's why I was asking about the areas because I saw so many celebrities on TikTok last night that were like, yeah, I lost my home. I lost my home. And so I was wondering, did this just affect those areas? And the reason I asked that is because I saw this video and it was an aerial shot of when the fire started. And like three fires in three completely different areas all started at the same exact time. And so people were like, is this arson? Like, what's going on here? And then when I woke up today, the Morning Wire podcast said that they are looking at arson as a possibility and they're trying to find, where it started because they don't know how it started yet. But people were saying, like, if they announce that there's going to be these record breaking winds, that would be the perfect time if you were like an arsonist to be like, I'm going to start a fire or something. So,
There have been so many of these tragic fires in California that have been started by arsonists, but from what I understand, like you said, like they still don't know anything yet. And I don't know that they're going to for a while because there's still so much prevention, not prevention, but active firefighting to be done that like looking at the causes is probably secondary on the list right now.
right. Yeah. Well, I couldn't help but think about Maui just because there's so many similarities. And like looking at the photos now, it looks like how Lahaina was, where it looks like the apocalypse. Everything's
Okay.
gone.
Wait, did you see? Maybe you sent it to me. I don't know. I can't remember who sent it to me. There was like a video and it was just showing all just masses and masses of cars that people had just left abandoned in the street
Oh, yeah, they need
and they're just,
bulldozers to move
yeah.
them out of the way. And
Yeah.
that was the thing. People, I saw this video of this woman who was like recording as all this was going down. And she sees all these people like on foot. And she's like, did you just leave your car? And they're like, yeah, they told us to leave our cars. And so all these people abandoned their cars. Well, then the fire department couldn't even get to where they
True.
needed to go to like help, whoever was stuck. Um, I heard a clip of one fireman like over the radio, and he was requesting police assistance because he's like, people are looting these homes. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, this is insane, like absolutely insane. Um, but anyhow, just like with Maui, it's like the mayor was MIA when the fires broke out. The
Hmm.
insurance companies canceled plans like just a few months prior to this. No water coming out of the fire hydrants, people abandoning their cars, like you said, leaving on foot, and then just the fires engulfing the homes so quickly. And that's what I think was just like bothering me. Like I was listening to one woman and she's like, thank God I was home when this happened because her neighbor called her at 10:30 and was like, we need to get out of here. This is going to be bad. She said she grabbed her dog, her passport, nothing else, left by 10:45, and it was already like really scary. So she's like, imagine people who didn't know right away or were at work and couldn't get home to check on their pets and stuff.
Okay, when you mentioned this to me yesterday, seeing this video, and it's just like, oh my God, it broke my heart because it's horrible to lose your home and all your belongings. But then I had all these images of people's pets like burning up in their homes
I
because
know,
they
I
were
know.
there
I
and it
should have
just made
sent
me
that to
so
you.
sad.
I just like it's been bothering me like so much. And then all the wildlife too, like up in the
Mhm.
hills and stuff, which I did see there's like a humane society there and they're like rescuing different animals and they were showing videos and stuff and
I know that LAPD Mounted is doing that, and I did that for a couple years when I worked there during some of the fires. They go and they rescue the horses, and that's a really crazy experience too. Especially, it surprises me how many people that live up in the hills in Los Angeles who have horses who don't have fucking trailers to transport their horses, especially living in areas where you know there are frequent fires, floods, whatever, and like you have no transportation for your animal. That just blows my fucking mind. But
yeah.
side,
Well, they probably have like hired help that
yeah.
maybe I don't know. But yeah, that it was so sad. Like that's all I could think about. And I'm like, it's so bad because I'm thinking more about the animals than I am, which is just like messed up. But anyhow, like we don't know if the fires were nefarious. But I've just got to go on a tangent real quick because it's just I cannot get it out of my mind after seeing that aerial footage and just the overall vibe on TikTok ever since Luigi Mangione or whoever allegedly killed that CEO of United Healthcare,
Mhm.
there has been like this huge movement on like go after the rich and the elites and the celebrities. And so I just couldn't help but think like, did someone do this in like a elite neighborhood? Is that could that have been the arson? Of course, we don't know. This is just where my crazy ass conspiracy brain goes. But like you said, I mean, all of that aside, I feel like it was an active choice made by politicians and managers in the state to not take the proper steps to prevent a fire of this magnitude because from everything I'm hearing, they knew it was coming. It wasn't like if, it was when. And what's crazy is Trump talked about this when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast back in October. And at the time, I remember thinking, like, come on, Trump, stay focused. Like, you're going on these wild tangents. What the hell are you talking about California for? But now I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. So I'm going to play a clip from that podcast because looking at it now, so crazy.
In order to protect a tiny little fish, the water up north gets routed into the Pacific Ocean. Millions and millions of gallons of water gets poured. I could have water for all of that land, water for your forests. Your forests are dry as a bone. Yeah. Okay? Dangerous. That water could be routed. You could have everything. Oh, not only dangerous, billions of dollars a year they spend on forest fires. So it was the Department of Commerce that needed the approvals, but Gavin Newsom had to sign them. I got it all done. Nobody could believe it. It was all done. I said, I got it. You got so much water. All you have to do is sign. And that guy didn't want to sign. In order,
He didn't want to sign. And he went on in that interview. Shoot, now I'm going to lose my train of thought of like what else he was talking about with that. I don't remember. But anyhow, like this could have been prevented. A lot of people knew about it. They were telling Trump about it and he wouldn't sign. And then Trump, oh, I remember what it was, the rest of that clip. He started threatening Newsom, like, I'm going to remove your federal funding if you don't take care of this. Oh, and the other thing was when he was in Europe, one of the biggest forests in the world over there, they were telling Trump, like, hey, you have these wildfires all the time. If you would just clear the brush, you wouldn't have them. We do this every season, we clear the brush. And so Trump was like, okay, we need to clear the brush. Who stopped him? The environmentalists. No, we can't do that. And it's like, how does this make sense? The environmentalists don't want to do that. They wanted to reroute millions of gallons of water for a fish, a single type of fish. But look at how all the wildlife that's dead now from these
Yeah.
fires. Like, how does that make sense for if you're an environmentalist? I don't understand it.
And that's I'm going to get into that later, but you mentioned Joe Rogan, right? And like aside from that clip with Trump, he's been preaching this shit for years. Like you can go back to 2019. He did this interview with journalist David Wallace Wells, and they were talking about how wildfires in California were predicted to get 64 times worse by the end of the century. And he has this story that he's told like over and over with multiple guests on the show. And I want to play this short clip from the New York Post that they put out yesterday. Joe Rogan's chilling wildfire warnings have resurfaced as Los Angeles battles devastating blazes that have displaced 100,000 residents, claimed 5 lives, and destroyed thousands of structures. Clips from Rogan's podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, show the comedian and UFC commentator repeatedly predicting a catastrophic fire scenario. Speaking with Sam Morrill in July, Rogan recalled being evacuated 3 times while living in LA, with 2 homes near his burning to the ground. Rogan, eerily wearing a Los Angeles Fire Department shirt at the time, recounted a firefighter's haunting warning. One day, it's just going to be the right wind, and the fire is going to start in the right place and burn through LA all the way to the ocean. There's not a effing thing we can do about it. This wasn't a one-time story. Rogan has repeated the warning on his podcast for years, notably during interviews with Darren Brown in 2018 and journalist David Wallace Wells in 2019, when they discussed worsening wildfire predictions.
As recently as last month, Rogan told directors Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery about the grim forecasts, with Tarantino admitting he was afraid to even think about the threat. Now that warning feels eerily prescient. With wind gusts exceeding 100 miles per hour, fires have rapidly grown across the Pacific Palisades and surrounding areas.
So I thought that was interesting because he's clearly been preaching about this for a very long time, as have many other people. But I have to ask, did you see Newsom's response?
I've seen a couple of different things, but
Okay.
not that particular one.
Okay, so Anderson Cooper from CNN was interviewing him at the scene, and he was asking about the issue with the hydrants, which we're going to get into here shortly. But Newsom basically said that it's the job of the local folks to figure it out. So I want to play this short clip.
What is the situation with the water? Obviously, in the Palisades ran out last night in the hydrants. I was talking to the firefighter in this block. They left because there was no water in the hydrant here. The local folks are trying to figure that out. I mean, just when you have a system that's not dissimilar to what we've seen in other extraordinarily large scale fires, whether it be pipe, electricity, or whether it just be the complete overwhelm of the system. I mean, those hydrants are typical for 2 or 3 fires, maybe one fire. You have something at this scale, but again, that's going to be determined by the local authorities.
Just going to be determined by the local folks.
What an arrogant son of a bitch. Like, seriously, this guy is unbelievable. And it makes me think of, watching him react to this situation versus watching DeSantis react to a hurricane. It's like night and day. And it's times like this where you see who the true leaders are and who the people are that like don't give a shit about the people whatsoever.
Yeah.
And he's getting all this flack for like his photo op with like, the smoke in the background and he's like posing kind of. And while he's like doing this whole little photo op, a resident runs up to him asking for help. You got to listen to how he like lies to her face and then he freaking starts laughing at her. So like she runs up and just to give some context, he holds his phone and he's like, I'm literally on the phone right now with Biden. This is what he says.
Oh my
Okay.
God.
So just listen to this whole thing.
Governor, I live here, Governor. That was my daughter's school, Governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
I'm literally talking to the president right now to specifically answer the question of what we can do for you and your daughter.
Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe it.
I'm sorry. There's literally, I've tried 5 times. That's why I'm walking around to make the
Why is
call
the president not taking your call?
because it's not going through. So I have to get cell service. There's no
Let's
cell
get it.
service.
Let's get it. I want to be here when you call the president.
I appreciate I'm doing that right now. And it's to immediately get reimbursements, individual assistance, and to help you. I'm devastated. I'm so sorry, especially for your daughter. I have 4 kids losing the school.
Who went to school there? They lost their home. They lost 2 homes because they were living in one and building another. Governor, please tell me, what are you going to do with the president right now?
We're getting the resources to help rebuild. We're getting the resources.
There's no water in the hydrants,
That's
Governor.
all it's all literally.
Is it going to be different next time?
Has to be. Has to
Right.
be. Of course.
What are you going to do?
I'm doing
To
everything
fill the
I can.
hydrants. I would fill them up personally. You
Now
know
he's
that.
like laughing.
I would fill up the hydrants myself. But would you do that?
Do whatever I can.
But I see do you know there's water dripping over there, Governor? There's water coming out there. You can use it.
I appreciate it. I'm going to make the call to address everything I can right now, including making sure people are safe.
Make sure you do.
He needs to
I have an opportunity to please tell people you're doing what you're saying you're doing.
Thank you.
Could somebody have
Okay, so at the end, he's literally like laughing, like he's like, haha, and like pushing her out of the way to get in his car.
I was going to say, he's like, get this fucking woman away from me.
Yeah, he's like, I'm literally on the phone with Biden right now. She's like, I don't believe you. Let me see. And he's like, okay, so I've literally tried calling him 5 times and I can't get through. And she's like, why isn't he answering? And he's like, well, I have no cell service. And it's like, clearly this guy is just like making shit up.
Yeah, when he's like, I'm literally calling about your daughter and the school. Like, no, you're not.
I know. And it's, who he reminds me of is Justin Trudeau. And I think the same thing is going to happen to him because
Oh, I
people are
hope
like wanting
so.
him to resign now, and he just looks so bad. And I think this has got to be the end of him. I don't know how he'll recover from this.
I think it's hopefully going to be the end of more than just him because there's a lot of people complicit in the bullshit going on in Los Angeles and California. But I want to call attention to one of the things he was saying like about the hydrants because he's like, "Oh, they're only good for one or two fires." And okay, hydrants have their limitations, but okay, if the city had actually addressed like ongoing problems that they have had for literally decades now. There was a point where the citizens voted 10 years ago to have reservoirs built and they were never constructed.
Yes. I didn't know that until I saw I think it was someone on X was posting it was like billions of dollars
Mhm.
that was supposed to go to building these reservoirs. Like you said, 10 years ago, not one has been built, not even one. And so I'm thinking, what happened to the billions of dollars? Is it kind of like how Newsom got $20 billion to solve homelessness, but now the problem is worse than ever? Like, where's this money going?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's like that rail system that they've been building for the last 30 years that
Right.
is also going nowhere. And
Ugh.
so, okay, I want to kind of play devil's advocate here before I totally trash the city. And I was a firefighter for a limited time. It was like 25 years ago, but I know a little bit about hydrants and water supply. And yes, they have their limits. And they're not meant to provide endless supplies of water, especially when you're using all of them at the same time, which is essentially what was happening with these fires. And it's like I think I made this comparison when we were talking about the Maui fires, but if you go around your house and you turn every faucet on, the pressure is going to drop, especially
Yeah.
if you have multiple floors, because and if you have older piping too, because the system like can't keep up with that constant pressure. And so multiply that to the point where you have like firefighters trying to put out hundreds of these fires at one time. It's not just one or two fires. So, yes, there are obviously going to be water issues. And according to the LA Department of Water and Power, there were 3 million gallons of water in the tanks in the Pacific Palisades before the fire started. They're saying the tanks were full. So there are three tanks and they each hold 1 million gallons. So the fire started at 10:30 a.m. on the 7th. But obviously, it moved so quickly. The demand for water was so high that even though the water department was pumping from the aqueducts and groundwater to try to refill these tanks, they couldn't keep up and the tanks went dry. So the chief executive and chief engineer of Water and Power Department, Janice Quinones, she said that the first tank ran dry just before 5 p.m. So it was from 10:30 to 5 p.m. The second tank went dry a few hours later, just before 9 p.m. And then the third tank was drained by 3 a.m. the following morning. So she gave a press conference yesterday and she was saying how there was this tremendous demand on the system and how they pushed the system to the extreme. And she said 4 times the normal demand was seen for 15 hours straight, which lowered our water pressure. Okay, that's totally valid, right? And there's also the elevation factor because, again, these fires were raging in the hills and down in the valley. So, with that much pressure on the system, the higher elevation they're not going to fill as quickly as the lower elevations. That's just gravity. So realistically, I can completely rationalize and understand these hydrants running dry and why there were major water supply issues. And they had excessive winds up to 100 miles an hour, so they couldn't rely on air tankers like they normally do with these fires to go to the nearby lakes and reservoirs and make water drops from above because with those winds, it was way too dangerous for planes and helicopters to be up in the air. I think they waited until the wind died down to like 50, 60 miles an hour, and then they were able to start making drops.
Okay, this is where maybe you can help me since you lived in California and know this better than I do, because I don't know anything about California. But like they're saying these are like record-breaking winds, or at least it hasn't happened in like decades where it's gotten up to 100 miles per hour. But I heard that and I'm like, that's what we get with hurricanes. So like what caused this? I mean, I was genuinely interested and I was trying to look up the cause and people were calling it a quote unquote air river, but not really giving much of an explanation. But the explanation that was given was climate change. And anytime I hear climate change as an explanation, it's like red flag. I don't think it's climate change. Give me a better explanation. So,
Yes.
I mean, is that unusual or weird for to have 100-mile-per-hour winds?
At that speed, yes. But the Santa Ana winds are a thing. They are not a result of climate change. They have been happening in California for over 5,000 fucking years. They happen every year, multiple times a year without fail. And it's usually between like 10 to 25 times a year that the Santa Anas come in. There's always a red flag warning for increased fire danger. And if you take a look at all of the major fires historically in California, the majority of them have been fueled by the Santa Ana winds. Like this goes back to the Santiago Canyon fire back in the late 1800s. The Santa Anas contributed to some of the most deadly wildfires in the state. The Witch Creek fire in 2007, the Woolsey fire in 2018, and like dozens and dozens of other fires. You can go look this shit up.
Okay, so hearing that, all the more outrageous it is that Newsom didn't do what Trump had asked him to do. It's like these fires have been happening. It's not like there's never been a fire in California. They are a thing. Even me in Florida, I know that California wildfires are a thing. It's just so mind-boggling that they actively went against doing anything to prevent it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No.
off. It's just so outrageous.
Oh no, it gets worse because like people call the Santa Anas devil winds. And the meaning's obviously pretty clear. But it's not just that they're a fire danger because these winds cause major damage in the agricultural industry. They have been known to damage like citrus trees and avocado trees. They impact pollination because these winds come at such excessive speeds that they can completely disrupt the ecosystems with the insects and they impact migration habits of birds. They spread dust and pollutants everywhere. And like, oh my God, I can recount so many times of just being outside and the Santa Anas are blowing and there's dust everywhere. And we would get power outages. You get shit blown over in your yard all the time. It's just a common thing. It happens every year without fail. And they're usually between fall and January. So this is not an anomaly, right? And the Santa Anas in particular are very dangerous because they're super dry winds. So they have like usually less than 5% relative humidity. So there's no moisture in them. And they're just super dry and they usually last for a few days, sometimes up to a week. I think the longest duration of like one Santa Ana wind was like 14 days. But usually it's about a week, right? And so what happens is these dry winds, they come down from this mountain range, the San Gabriel Mountains, and then as they move towards the coast, they build up pressure in the east in the Great Basin area. And then they kind of go down slope through the mountains and the mountain passes and the canyons. And as they do, they just get drier and hotter. And it's due to this whole compression process called adiabatic heating. So when this pressure combines with the low pressure systems that come off the coast, the more extreme the difference is between these two pressures, the faster the wind blows. So normally Santa Ana winds range from like 30 to 60 miles per hour. So yes, having 100-mile-per-hour winds is not quote normal with Santa Anas, but this is not the first time it's happened. Back in December of 2011, Pasadena and Altadena, they had winds, sustained winds of 97 miles an hour with gusts of up to 167 miles an hour.
That's
And
insane. That's like a
oh yeah,
category five, more than a category five hurricane.
yeah,
Shit.
it was crazy. And like there were no major fires during that incident, but the winds caused massive damage like you would expect with a hurricane. They destroyed thousands of trees, hundreds of homes. There was a whole state of emergency declared at the time. Like I remember schools were closed, People lost power for over a week, and the winds were so bad that they made their way to the Mammoth Mountains, where they were gusting at speeds of like 175 miles an hour. So again, not a new phenomenon, right? And I read this article this morning in a publication called The Conversation. And there's a research ecologist in California named John Keeley. And he was talking about a study he recently published where he and one of his colleagues have tracked the Santa Ana winds for the past 71 years. So starting from like 1948. And their like tracking found that the amount of wind activity hasn't really increased and it has stayed consistent over time. There has been a shift in when the winds occur. So in the past, and I remember this from my childhood, the Santa Anas were typically more prevalent in September and October. And I like have distinct memories of Halloween with like the Santa Ana winds. But now they're saying there's a shift to the winds being more prevalent in December and January. But that's been ongoing for a few years. And he points out in this research paper that like it's very tempting for people to blame it on climate change and global warming, but there's no like evidence to substantiate this. And this makes me so like angry because we've said this so many times. Weather is fucking weather, and it goes in cycles, and it has for the entire duration of life on Earth. And the difference now is the world is overpopulated and people keep building in flood zones and wildfire zones, and there's like no buffer zone anymore between the population and the wilderness. But these are the risks of expansion in society, and especially in areas like this where you put more and more power lines into the wilderness because they have the greatest chance of being hit by tree branches, when these winds kick up, and sparking fires when there's extreme weather. So I don't believe it's climate change as much as it's human intervention in fucking with nature. And there's a very clear history of how these winds again and again and again have contributed to devastating fires in California.
Okay, this is what I love about you. I went on like every freaking news page. You gave a better explanation and history than like any of the news organizations or anyone posting articles out there. So maybe you should be a reporter because that's the only explanation I could find other than climate change when I went and looked.
Yeah, like the climate change narrative, like that's the blame for everything. And it's just
Everything.
it's so wrong. And okay, so like let's put nature and the hydrant limitations and the winds aside, right? And let's focus on the other problems in California. And one of those is they have had a water supply issue for a very long time, and it has been repeatedly ignored. There's infrastructure and piping throughout the city that is not adequate for the city's needs at all. And this has been brought up time and time again and never addressed. So instead, what does the city do? They waste money on, projects like we mentioned before, initiatives for climate justice and all the DEI nonsense. And you brought this up in the beginning with the vegetation, right? That's one of the biggest contributors to the spread of these fires is this massively overgrown vegetation, which this is what pisses me off. Like, it's not just the rights activists, it's the fucking city that stops this from happening because there are mandated like environmental regulations that prevent controlled burns. So the fire department can do these controlled burns. They do them in states all over the country. I'm sure they do them
They're
all
doing
over
them
the
here
world.
right now, even in Florida where it's humid.
Yeah. And it's like, excuse me, California has the Clean Air Act. Okay. So they will not allow these controlled burns to happen because it's in violation of the Clean Air Act. So what that says to me is it's entirely the responsibility of the government, aka Newsom, and the local city and county officials who have allocated precious water resources for shit like, I don't know if you remember this, but this was a few months ago. They're building this new Disney resort and they're allocating like, oh my God, my mom told me, I can't remember how much water for building these giant lakes. So they're telling the people that you have to, conserve your resources, but they're allocating water for this lake for Disney.
Just like when they tell everyone you have to buy an electric vehicle, but you're not allowed to charge it.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, so you tell residents to conserve water and take shorter showers and not water your lawns. And like, remember this from my childhood. Like this, oh my God, these fires bring up so many memories for me. But I remember there were, maybe they still do this, I'm not sure. There were restrictions on what days you could use water. And like, you could only water your lawn on Wednesdays between, 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. or some shit like that. And if you were caught watering outside of your allocated time frame, you would get fined, right? But of course, that doesn't apply to the elites. That doesn't apply to the fancy golf courses and the wealthy homes and the Disney projects. And like, I could honestly go on with this shit for hours. But my point is, those reservoirs we talked about, those should have been made a priority a long fucking time ago. And the redirection of water from up north should have been made a priority a long fucking time ago. And the infrastructure problems with the water system should have been addressed a long fucking time ago, especially in a state where wildfires are prevalent every single fucking year without fail. And it's like these 6 fires together are becoming, it's the most destructive fire in the history of Los Angeles, the Palisades fire. And I think it's been at least like 40 years since there was a fire anywhere near this magnitude in the city of Los Angeles. And you've got to think, like, even when that happened, the city wasn't anywhere near as developed as it is now. There weren't as many people as there are now. And so, as tragic as this situation is, I really fucking hope it's a wake up call for the leaders, and I'm using the word leaders in air quotes here, of California, who need to be taking responsibility and accountability for mismanaging the state, not fucking laughing at residents who are crying for help and blaming everybody else. And honestly, I think one of the only reasons the fires are even getting this much attention is because of all of the celebrities who live in Los Angeles, who have lost their homes, who are speaking out against Newsom and Mayor Bass.
Oh, yeah. And they are. They're going crazy. Jillian Michaels posted Newsom's photo, and then the caption read, resign, in like big, bold letters. James Woods posted, quote, the fire is not from climate change, you ignorant asshole. It's because liberal idiots like you elect liberal idiots like Newsom and Karen Bass. One doesn't understand the first thing about fire management, and the other can't fill the water reservoirs. And then Sarah Foster posted, quote, we pay the highest taxes in California. Our fire hydrants were empty. Our vegetation was overgrown, brush not cleared. Our reservoirs were emptied by our governor because tribal leaders wanted to save fish. Our fire department budget was cut by our mayor. But thank God drug addicts are getting their drug kits. And then she tagged the mayor and the governor and said, resign. Your far left policies have ruined the state and also our party. And then Adam Carolla did a podcast episode, and he had a good point. He was saying that these fires are going to be the biggest red pill for the blue state of California, because when all these people go to rebuild, first of all, the people that can, because a lot of them won't be able to, they're going to get slapped with all sorts of permitting and licensing issues. He said it's impossible to rebuild quickly because there's just so many, ridiculous regulations that they voted in when voting for these super left politicians. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I don't know if you read the story. One of the guys who died in the fire, I think in Altadena, he was like in his 60s, and they found his body like clutching the hose that he was trying to
Oh
protect
my
his house,
God.
because it was his parents' house, and they'd had it for 50 years. And it's like, yeah, I'm sorry you celebrities lose your home that you can probably afford to rebuild, and you have great insurance and all that other shit, and you get another one. But then you look at some of the families who've lost everything, including their own lives, trying to protect like the only thing they own.
Yeah. Yeah. That they worked their whole life for.
Mhm.
And, then insurance cancels their plan. And months later, you have these fires. Like, it's absolutely insane. And, I think what Adam Carolla said, it's a great point. I mean, they keep voting for this leftist shit because I think a lot of these celebrities are so far removed from it. You know, they don't have to deal with it. But now, when it's actually affecting their life, maybe they'll look at it differently. I don't know. But then you have the mayor, Karen Bass. You know, like I said, she was MIA as the fires broke out. She was actually in Ghana celebrating the inauguration of the president there. So at the airport on her way back, a Sky News reporter, which Sky News is like the only network that's actually reporting.
I love that network.
Yeah. And so they stop her at the airport, and instead of like answering their questions or making a formal statement, she just stares at the ground and completely ignores him with no comment at all. So listen to this.
Citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning. Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them?
Literally nothing to say.
Oh my God, I watched that clip and I was so disgusted that she said she couldn't even look at him. And then she just starts walking away. And it's like, this is your fucking city. You're the
Your
fucking
city's
mayor of
burning
this
down
city.
and you don't
Yeah,
have one word
not a word. Yeah.
to say. I mean, disgusting. I saw another clip of her like in the town hall, and one of the reporters asked a question. She cuts him off and is like, "We're doing what we can to save lives and save homes." And he's like, "But you didn't." And he just called like they're gone. The homes are gone. And she just, it's complete incompetence, like he said. It's crazy. And this is the woman who cut fire department funding by over $17 million a few months ago and moved that money again towards the homeless population. Yet most of the money wasn't even spent at this point. And she wanted to cut 23 million, but got 17 million approved. It's just like unfucking believable. And then I have another clip from this real estate developer, Rick Caruso, and he gave an interview with the LA Times. Listen to what he has to say.
My heart goes out, obviously, to the people with their homes, and I'm watching the small businesses around us go up in flames. This is people's livelihood. So it's devastating. But what is most concerning to me is our first responders and our firefighters who are trying to battle this. There's no water in the Palisades. There's no water coming out of the fire hydrants. This is an absolute mismanagement by the city. Not the firefighters' fault, but it's for the city. And I'm going to be very honest. We've got a mayor that's out of the country, and we've got a city that's burning, and there's no resources to put out fires. So if you look at your pictures, you don't see the firefighters there because there's nothing they can do. And it looks like we're in a third world country here. Mm-hmm. And we've got a lot of tough questions that we need to ask the mayor and the city council and our representatives and the county representatives. Why didn't you work to mitigate this? What was your brush mitigation program? I heard you earlier talking about it's been dry because there hasn't been rain. That's not the biggest problem here. The brush up in these hills that are controlled by the city and the county, I would beg you that if they haven't been handled, mitigated, pruned, removed for probably 30 or 40 years. This was a disaster waiting to happen.
So basically,
And he's not just a real estate developer. This guy, he ran against her for mayor in the 2022 election. And he, I don't know if he still is, but at one point he was a member of the board of water and power commissioners. So this guy knows what he's fucking talking about. And again, like, I'm so disgusted with her, but you mentioned the fire department cuts. And let me just preface this by saying I am not a fucking fan of the LA fire chief, Kristen Crowley, because she is, oh my God, her DEI focus is so fucking extreme. And a side note, like if you really want to hear someone rip into this woman, go listen to Megyn Kelly's episode yesterday because it was hilarious yet brutal.
Okay, side note with Megyn Kelly, I didn't listen to the whole episode, but I saw this clip where she's calling out David Muir, who's the ABC News guy that like was unfair to Trump in the debate. Did you hear that? He's like sitting there with a firefighter jacket on, and she's like, "Why is he wearing a fireman jacket?" And then he turns, and there's like clothespins that are like cinching the jacket, so it looks more like fitted. And she's like, what the hell? Like, what is he playing dress up? Like, this is so ridiculous.
I did not see that part, but I listened to parts of the episode where she's ripping into Crowley, who I guess is a lesbian. And she's like, we don't, she was actually cursing, which she rarely does on her podcast. She's like, we don't give a fuck who you want to sleep with or what your sexual preferences. And her mandate to hire women, and you can't hire women because you can't get enough qualified women, and all the shit that I have said before and completely agree with. But I will give Crowley props for one thing, and that is that she did warn Bass even just a few weeks ago that like these massive cuts to the fire department's budget was going to affect their readiness and capabilities. And NBC News reported on this memo that she wrote on December 4th. And it was talking about how this like nearly 18 million loss in their budget, she said, quote, severely limits the department's capacity to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies, including wildfires, end quote. So the New York Times, the New York Post, they reported that one of the cuts was like $7 million in overtime pay. And okay, overtime pay, right? But part of this overtime is what the department has relied on to pay for their FAA mandated pilot training and helicopter coordination staffing to prepare for these wildfires. And Crowley laid all of this out to the Board of Fire Commissioners. It was very detailed, talking about how, these cuts were jeopardizing not only aerial operations, but like their disaster response for bulldozer teams and everything. But then Bass gives this statement on Wednesday night, and she's talking about how she's confident that the budget cuts didn't hinder any of their operational response, which is total bullshit.
Because she's an expert. You have the fire chief saying it did, but she's like, no, it didn't. It's just so ridiculous, And yeah, so with the whole insurance thing too, State Farm, which was one of the biggest insurance companies for the state, canceled hundreds of insurance plans so that the company could avoid financial failure since wildfires have increased in recent years because of all this BS. But then there were also multiple smaller insurance companies that did the same thing. So they're saying that over half of the people who lost homes are not going to be insured. I think the Wall Street Journal posted about that. And so I guess there's something in California called the FAIR Plan. You probably know a lot more about it, which is like a last resort for coverage for wildfires. And just over the last 4 years, the amount of people using this has doubled to 452,000 people. So that's how many people apparently lost coverage through their insurance company and now have to rely on the state.
Yeah, this is a whole other thing because I don't see it as being the insurance companies that are to blame, because this all ties back to the city government and how they're dealing with the insurance companies. And there was an article in Reason that was talking about how most of this started back in 2017 and 2018 with the wildfires that were going on then, and how a lot of insurers started decreasing their coverage after that because the fires cost them like $23 billion. And it was twice what they had collected in premiums over the same period. So they were totally taking a loss. Like it was not worth it from a cost perspective. So I don't think their initial intention was to cancel plans altogether, because a lot of the responsibility lies with the insurance commissioner of the state, and that his name is Ricardo Lara. And he is an elected official whose job is to approve insurance premium increases, and he would not approve the increases. So what he has been doing lately is he's been trying to basically bully private insurance companies to increase their coverage. And just last month, he made an announcement where he said, quote, "For the first time in history, we are requiring insurance companies to expand where people need help the most. Major insurance companies must increase the writing of comprehensive policies in wildfire distressed areas equivalent to no less than 85% of their statewide market share," end quote. So the state's not allowing these companies to raise their coverage in areas that are known for wildfire danger and, consistent fires every single year. So the companies are getting fucked and losing money. So of course they're going to leave the state. And that's exactly what State Farm did. It's not worth it to them. So you brought up the FAIR plan. Well, the big question with the FAIR plan is like, what happens when the money runs out and who's actually paying for it? Because it's my understanding that this is basically like an insurance pool, and it covers up to 3 million in damages for residential properties and 20 million for commercial properties. But like you said, there's over 452,000 policies. And how do they get paid out? From everything I've read, it's the responsibility of the insurers who haven't already left the state that are required to bail out the program. So who ends up paying for that? It's going to be the fucking California homeowners, because they're going to get fucked with rate hikes and surcharges. And you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, the estimated damage is over $50 billion right now. And insured losses have already surpassed 20 billion, which is like so far out of the realm of the plan's coverage. And even before the fires, homeowners were complaining that this FAIR plan sucks. And I look at it like, HMO insurance coverage, it's shitty. So I was reading this article in the LA Times. This was back in July of last year. There's a class action lawsuit from 4 California residents who sued the FAIR plan for subpar coverage for fire and smoke damage. And the article said, quote, "The proposed class action lawsuit seeks to represent more than 300,000 of the plan's residential policyholders. The plan is also facing a lawsuit from more than 1,000 homeowners in Los Angeles who say the plan wrongly denied their claims," end quote. So this was before these devastating fires, and I can only imagine it's going to be a complete shit show for anyone with this coverage who has lost their home this week or had damage to their home. And I think they would honestly be more likely to get fucking $750 from FEMA than any kind of coverage from this insurance plan.
Yeah. Well, old man Biden yesterday, he announced that the federal government will cover 100% of recovery costs for 180 days after. And then Kamala gave this whole speech about the devastation, which right away I'm thinking, like, I'm comparing that to her speech about the hurricanes, like where she was like, you get 750 if you apply online. So people aren't too happy. Oh, and Biden adds, we will spare no expense. And so I'm watching this on the ABC News TikTok. And so then I go to the comments and people are like outraged. You have one person saying, $750 for North Carolina, 100% for Beverly Hills. Got it. Another said, money for the rich, not for the people. Celebrities are the ruler's jesters. Of course, they take care of their own. Someone else said, what about Hawaii and Western North Carolina? Not your people. I get it. And I sure hope this money does go to help the people of California, but we know it won't. And later on, I was trying to look into it, and it was listing out things like it's going to go to city resources and things like that, which basically means it's going to go in Newsom's pocket. Like, I doubt any of that money is going to actually help individuals rebuild their homes, unless, of course, it's an elite celebrity that's friends with Newsom. Then maybe they might get a piece of the pie.
Yeah, I think this whole thing is super shady and I don't trust it. And it's like funny how he made this announcement within 2 days of these fires starting. Well, if you look back at Maui and, North Carolina, Florida, not a peep, not a peep from the Biden admin for days, I think like maybe weeks, and it certainly wasn't this kind of assistance. And he also ordered the Department of Defense to deploy firefighting personnel to Los Angeles, and I think he ordered like 10 Navy helicopters with the water buckets, and Newsom deployed the National Guard. And just totally off topic side note, Biden just approved another $500 million security aid package for Ukraine yesterday. So yeah, it's pretty clear that his priorities are, helping the elites and supporting blue cities and states and, continuing to fund war in another country. And I want to point out something else you brought up earlier, because it's so disgusting to me how many people are taking advantage of these fires to loot and ransack other people's homes that they had to leave behind. And I think like 20 people so far have been arrested for looting. Now the city has a curfew in place. And so, of course, Newsom gives a statement and he's like, looting will not be tolerated. Like, okay, you're a fucking state that has no criminal accountability whatsoever. So I can imagine that even these people who have been arrested aren't going to face any consequences other than maybe a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, it's such a joke. And what's crazy is like, you have more people than ever living in that state, paying more than ever in taxes, and yet it's a shit show. I mean, it's absolutely a shit show. It's unbelievable. Like the worst leadership probably in the history of the country. Like absolutely insane. But of course, we have to incorporate orbs and drones into this conversation. Because okay, so there were like flying objects that were caught like on live TV that the news was airing. So this like started this whole whirlwind on TikTok with all these videos. And I sent you one of them, and it was captioned, "When was the last time you saw a rocket shoot out of a fire?" And I mean, it literally looks like a rocket launching out of a wildfire. I mean, like that was weird, right?
Yeah,
That's not
that
normal.
was no, that was definitely a weird video for
It
sure.
wasn't like an ember flying. It looked like a freaking rocket, like what you see in like Gaza. Like it was just like, what the hell? And I mean, there's been all sorts of videos of like orbs and other flying objects that look like UFOs. And
Well,
some
maybe
people are
they
like,
started the fires.
yeah, people are like, did they start the fires or are they here to save us because they know we're like destroying ourselves? Like it's just they tie to everything, these drones. I'm telling you, it's like
Oh my, you know
wild.
what's going to happen? They're going to come out and they're going to say that it was drones from China that started the fires.
Yeah, no, probably just to have another, excuse to enter World War III, right?
Yeah.
So we could talk about this for like literally hours, and I'm sure there's going to be so many more updates as the days go on. So we'll update everyone as we go. But before we end, I have to give an update from what we talked about on Wednesday, where we were laughing about Trump renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Mhm.
Well, that it completely went over my head. Okay, I didn't put two and two together until someone else did on TikTok. But the reason he did that is because when Biden put the ban on offshore drilling, the legal documents say you can't drill in the Gulf of Mexico, but it doesn't actually give parameters or like a location with coordinates. So by renaming it, he can legally drill because he's not drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, he's drilling in the
Mhm.
Gulf of America. And so it like clicked with me when he announced it. He said, "This covers a lot of territory." And that's why. And I was like, he is such a good chess player because I mean, isn't that pretty genius?
Yeah, but he probably should have kept that quiet until Biden's out of office so
Yeah.
Biden can't make changes to the legal documents. But since you brought up Trump, I have to ask you, did you see the videos of him like cozying up to Obama at Jimmy Carter's funeral yesterday?
Yes, I saw that. And I saw like Kamala looks back at them and she looks so just like annoyed. They look like they were old buddies just hanging out, having a good time, chatting.
Yeah, and like that kind of made me pause, and I don't know what I think about that. Like I'm sure he's playing the game, but I think it's a very poor optic.
I didn't know what to think of it too. Like, I want to think he's playing the game, but part of me was like, what's going on? Like,
Yeah.
are these long time friends? And you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
it was very weird because they seemed to really be enjoying each other's company.
Well, remember you brought this up like, I don't know, months ago, how like maybe he's just part of the whole,
PSYOP or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
I know. That's exactly what crossed my mind. I was like, what is going on? Was this all some master plan? I
mhm,
mean, we can't really draw a conclusion from like one interaction,
no,
but it was not a good look, definitely.
yeah.
Wasn't a
I'm
good
just
look.
gonna use the word interesting. 'Cause-
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see as we go. I watched that video so many times because there were people like professional lip readers that were trying to make out what they were saying, which I think was BS because none of it made sense. Um, so hopefully it was just like, hey, like I won. I'm not going to be an asshole or I'm going to talk to
Yeah,
him. I don't know.
I guess we'll see.
We'll see. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you have a great weekend and we'll see you back here on Monday.